Okay, I've noted myself a couple of things, Dr. Nicola, to talk to you about the Israeli adoption of cloud computing. We have some similar things, so I wrote myself to talk to you about later. Our next Spain, we're moving on to a different part of the Mediterranean, so we are hosting Yuval from CSA Spain. He's coming over to talk to us about forensics and audit. Forensics and audit are important in cloud adoption. We see this throughout the day, everybody talking about how to audit your provider, so Yuval will give us his views things. Thank you, Yuval.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you, CSA Israel chapter. First of all, I am proud to be here, and thank you so much, Mos. Okay, I am a member of the Spanish chapter of the CSA, a member of the technical committee as well. And 1 year ago, the work group decided to perform a study on how to help security staff and auditors to perform auditing or supervising over the cloud services. So we decided to perform the study on a high level, and to conduct the main activities to face the challenge that implies to perform the supervision of cloud in terms of audit or forensics. So we decided to do it in a high level, but this year we are working on a second phase of this study, and we are going in depth in the continuous monitoring and continuous audit. This morning, someone was talking about the importance of continuous monitoring and continuous audit, and that's one of the reasons that we are working here too. So, what is our context? All we know that cloud services are increasing, even or more and more, but we found here the first challenge. The speed of the methods or techniques to supervise the cloud services are not increasing at the same velocity. So we have here one of the first challenges. This data is from Gartner, and if we see, privacy and security are one of the main concerns for the companies who are using cloud services. So if the services are increasing and we don't have enough methods or techniques to supervise it, we have a problem. So what happened, what one of us tried to face to supervise, to audit, or to do a forensic analysis, we have the predisposition to use classic strategies, and all we know that classic strategies don't work in cloud. The classic strategies are incomplete and are inefficient. So to set an appropriate supervising strategy, we need to struggle with legal and contractual limitations. We have restriction to access the resources of third parties in case the provider are working with other providers. And that's why we decided to make this study. So our study tried to define a supervising strategy in a high level, taking into account the cloud distinctive features and determinant aspects, and bringing a new approach to include these specific activities into the main phases of the classic audit or supervision. In this picture, we can see how we face it to this study. So, first of all, we have challenge, okay? We have to know all of this challenge, and then once we know it, or once we know them, we can define the strategy to supervise the services. And then once we know the strategy and the challenge, we can define the specific activities to supervise the services. And that's the way we thought how to face this study. What are the main challenges to conduct supervision? First of all, right to audit. We need a clause. We need a specific clause where it's defined the aspects to allow us supervise the service. It is really important. If we don't have this clause, we have nothing. Second, single point of contact. It's very difficult when we work with service provider to have one person and identify one person in case we have a security incident or in case we have a problem, to contact them and try to solve the problem. When we work on-premise, it's easier. We have restricted access to the evidence. When we are working on a forensic case or performing an audit, we need evidence. So, what happened? When we are working with providers, it's difficult with the pretext of confidentiality of others' clients, and it's right. It's difficult to access this evidence. So we need to establish and to make a clause where we can put all these things on the contract. Of course, multi-tenant complexity. It is more complex to audit cloud services than on-premises. And theoretically, it introduces a new risk or new security risk, at least potentially. So we have to take it into account too. Geographical dispersion. What happens to our data? We know, or we need to know where are our data located in order to comply or be in fulfillment with the legality. Virtual components, of course. Virtual components introduce more complexity when we want to supervise our services. Software development. If we are working on a SaaS model, probably we haven't got, or we have a little control over the developers. So if we are working on an IA infrastructure as a service or a platform as a service, we need to at least try to isolate environments and try to restrict access to each environment. And data deletion, it is important too. Even if we have a contract or clause where we state that in case of the finish of the service, the data would be erased. If we are working as an auditor or a forensic, we need to check it. So this is important too, because of the replication of the data in other servers or other locations. And of course, finally, top management awareness. If our top management is not aware, it's difficult that they support us to put in place these controls, okay? So first we have the challenge, and then once we know the challenge, we need to define and strategy. And of course, we recommend a strategy based on risks. But beside the risks, we need to know previous experience, relevant changes, and business support. We need to know what happens if a breach occurs in our company, what happens if we are not compliant with GDPR or PCI or whatever, what happens if we decide to move or to change the provider or the vendor locking, what are the implications. We have to know the incidents that had occurred in the past, previous audits, what about the findings, and the tendency in our industry or others or competition or etc., what is happening in the sector, okay? And of course, we need to know about the legal or regulatory and organizational aspect. Think about the GDPR, think about in our organization, someone decides to move his process to a cloud, what implies it, and technological implies. Think about if a new provider appears or a new technology. So we have to know all of this to define a proper strategy. And of course, we have to know the expectation of our business, of the top management or audit committee or business areas. So once we know the challenge and the strategy, we can go ahead and define the activities to include in each phase of the audit. The most important things here is in the beginning. The plan with a proper audit plan and a proper working program, okay? What are the key aspects? The type of audit and the previous analysis of resources carry out the audit, okay? So, the contractual coverage is really important. We need to establish contract clauses to control it. For example, the right to install audit tools or the right to audit, to gather logs and to storage it, and the time of response to provide evidence. It is important if we have an incident, the time of response that the provider give us the evidence. And of course, responsibility. Who is going to correct these findings, or who is going to manage this incident? Who is going to follow up these findings? In case we have third parties, what happened? Who is going to act in that case, okay? Of course, we have other formal aspects like control framework that it depends, or it will depend on the type of audit, regulation, internal policies, and certification. This morning, some mates was talking about certification, and that avoid us extra work. So, the most important thing when we make an audit plan, the risk, the type of audit, and try to cite other IT audits. It is important not to repeat the same test and try to take advantage of other audits. Regarding working program, we recommend to define a top-down scope. So, first of all, governance, secondly, IT processes, and then technical or operational controls, okay? And to define a proper working program, we have to take into account indicators. What happens if our company doesn't have a compliance program? Or even if the company has it, this plan is not aligned with the cloud perspective. What happens if we have shadow IT? Maybe the business needs something for us. Of course, if we have an increasing of cyber incident, or we don't know where the data is located, it's are very important indicators to define a proper working program. Once we have defined the plan and the working program, just only is to execute the audit, and the amount of and quality of evidence will depend on clauses, the service model, and deployment model. In some cases, will be easier than others, okay? And finally, we need to state a report, and we recommend to split the report in internal findings and external findings regarding the CSP. Okay, it depends on each company, and it will be different. Okay, and the most important is try to establish a continuous monitoring and continuous audit. Forensics challenge. We consider forensic as a second activity of supervising. So we can consider it at the previous of an incident, a previous activity to be ready to investigate, or a post activity after an incident takes place. Of course, the first or the main important challenge on cloud forensics is higher vulnerability than on-premise. The client has less control on the environment, and we need external support. Think about the legal implications, okay? We decided to divide it in 3 groups. Legal and contractual challenge. Think about the evidence gathering. What about the multi-tenant, geographical dispersion, etc.? Lack of cooperation of the CSP. We need to know if we have a clause and we have defined what it's going to be the collaborating model. The chain of custody. The chain of custody in cloud implies a lot of people working together, a lot of locations, and it includes more complexity to the work. Of course, organizational is always important. And lack of procedures adopted to cloud. We are working about all of this, and few companies have clear procedures to adopt the cloud regarding forensics. We have extended chain of work. We have different providers, different technologies, and it's difficult to align those people to work together and to contribute one on each other, because they are working for different companies, so it's difficult. And last but not least, the technical challenges. We were talking about the difficulty to identify and gather evidence, the volatility on data. We have huge volume of information that it's complicated, and it's difficult to establish a single temporal line. Think about different technologies, different cloud providers, and when we are working in a forensic case, we need to establish a single line, a single temporal line, and it's really difficult to. So we have a bunch of challenges. So once we know the challenge, we can define the strategy. We have the same phases, the traditional forensic, but we need to adopt similar to the audit. And the main points are what kind of deployment model we have, what kind of service model, and the technical specification. What are the methods to access the environment? What are the technologies used to deploy? What about the software and versions and the storage systems? We used the classic 5-step phases to conduct the analysis. And the most important are 1, 2, and 4, because requires significant change respect classic forensic. Regarding the first one, the most important thing are to identify the law and geographic of client CSP, GDPR, Constitution, Penal Code, other Internet Acts, CSP contract clauses, to get the support of top management and to get defined the role and responsibility. Who is going to act in the forensic? Who is going to do something? We need to define it before the analysis. The same for the process and procedures. We need to define what is going to be the processes and the procedures. And of course, training and awareness. Our team must be trained and warned in different technologies to conduct a proper analysis. And at least we need to identify the proper logs, the limitations to deploy tools, and difference between the models, okay? Probably if we try to monitor or to conduct analysis over the hypervisor is really complex. Summarizing, in the first phase, we have to identify regulatory bodies that could apply, negotiate clauses with the CSP to audit or to conduct forensics. We need the support of top management. We need to define role and responsibilities to execute the analysis. We need to define the technical procedures to execute the analysis. And of course, we need to configure environment to gather logs and events and deploy tools to audit, mainly memory snapshots. In the second step, when we gather information, it's very important to identify the log sources. So, personal equipment, network, infrastructure, whatever. Then, we need to identify the order of volatility, considering both client and CSP environment. And once we have that, we can proceed to evidence gathering and then local load. Of course, always trying to keep chain of custody during the whole process. And the final phase is the analysis one. And we recommend to divide into 3 phases because it's easier to manage the amount of data. We have an initial inspection, which aim is to categorize the event and determine the potential impact. We have a second phase, the preliminary analysis, to get initial info to determine how to carry out the analysis. And the final and most important phase is the deep analysis in itself. It's a full analysis to answer or to respond the questions. What happened? How happened? Why? Who did it? And what are the consequences? So, summarizing, that are the challenge, the strategy, and the main activities to put in each phase on audit and forensics. As a conclusion, it's important to define a cloud governance model. Contractual clauses to support forensics must be defined. The concept of readiness in phase 1 of cloud forensics. We need preparation of the environment. It is crucial. And forensics activities must be adapted to the type of service and CSP. And finally, we need to try to integrate in the incident management. And that's all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ivan, for this view of the forensics and audit activities. Thank you, CSA Spain, for joining us. All of you have a question for Ivan?
Sorry? Yeah, it's a theoretical study. And of course, it's a challenge itself because we need to put in place and try to negotiate and not struggle with providers. So I agree with you. And we are working in the second phase, but it's difficult to put in place. But at least if we are working as an auditor, we have to know and we have to state to the top management what is the situation. Maybe you can control a bunch of risks, but you have to know that you have a risk. It's difficult. It depends on each company. Probably if you are a huge company, the approach is different from another more not so big. And it depends on the countries, on the culture, on the maturity. Probably when some years passed, it would be easier to negotiate. But at the moment, I agree with both of us. It's theoretical, but our idea was to face the challenge, and of course, our challenge, and it's not easy to solve the problem, but at least to know them. Thank you. Any questions? So, thank you.
Thank you again, Ivan. Thank you, Olaf, for being